Welcome to this Friday edition of the Bullpen Show. I am your host and the lead commissioner for MLB 2K24 Fantasy Baseball, Thomas Cashin. Hopefully, everybody's having a very good week this week. We got a lot of close ball games this week. We've only got one blowout as of right now, and everything else is coming down to the wire. So, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get to our guest tonight on this show. Go ahead and give Scotty a call.
Hello.
Hey, Scotty, how's everything going for you this week?
Pretty good. Pretty good. How are you doing, Thomas?
I'm doing good. Looks like everything throughout the board, it looks like all the games are really tight this week. A lot of changes. Um, a lot of changes today. Um, just a really tight schedule. We only got one blowout that's going on right now. But while I've got you there, hold tight real quick and hold tight real quick. Folks, I'm going to go ahead and run down the scores so far as of 9 p.m. Now, this may have just changed, but as of 9 p.m., uh, you have the Wildcats, that's Tammy at 281. The Chili Dogs, that's Ken at 254. Now, what's interesting, Scott, about this game, Ken was on fire until he got beat by the Dominators, myself, last week, and he's now out of a playoff spot. And the Wildcats have been struggling as they were featured on our ice cold Who's Not segment on Monday. And right now, Ken had a lead in this all weekend this week, and all of a sudden tonight, we'll see if it stands throughout the night and on into the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. But right now, it looks like the Wildcats have kind of snatched the lead away from Ken.
I've seen that. I've seen that, and that's really interesting.
It's like you got one team, like we said, Ken that had been on fire. Now he's out of the playoff picture, and you got the Wildcats. They're also out of the playoff picture. But this is one of these games right here, that really when you look at the end of the year and who's at 4 and who's at 5 or who's at 6, this is one of those games right here that can really make the difference. And who's in that last playoff spot and who's not.
You're
We
exactly right.
and our next game of the week, not game of the week, but our next game this week, you have the Gatlinburg Cubs at 412 points, and the Warner Robin Bombers Jackson at 223 points. So the Cubs, folks, are 0 and 10. So far, point out that they've got the most points on the league, by pretty much close to 100. We'll see if that's going to stand Saturday and Sunday. But right now, the Cubs look to have a 190-point lead on the Bombers. All right, Scott. So, how do you like your chances of actually, you know, getting that monkey off your back?
Well, like I talked about in a couple of bullpen shows ago, once you get that first victory, things might start rolling. Um, we don't know yet if things are going to start rolling in our favor. We won't know that for a good while, but I feel like I feel like things are starting to come around. My hitting's starting to kind of chime off. Early in the week, I had a couple of home runs from people that should be hitting them every night that hasn't, but they're starting to come around.
Yeah, tell me about
Uh,
that.
my my pitching, my pitching has been dominated. It seems like everything has been clicking, and every move that I could possibly make to help push it further and help it click further, it seems like I'm hitting every right move. I picked up a couple of pitchers off the waiver wire this week, and they both, 25 to 35 points. Things just seem to really be clicking for the Cubbies.
Well, when it's your week, it's your week. That's all I can say. I mean, I've had those weeks before where You pick up a couple of waiver starters and they go off for 40 points, and you either you bury your opponent or you try to make some moves, on the waiver
Well,
pickup and struggle.
two is I think the biggest thing is that kid that I picked up from Seattle, 35 points either last night or the night before, 30 something points. And when I went back and looked at him, he's kind of a hidden gem. I really think I stumbled upon a little hidden gem that could help me in the long run.
Right. Well, folks, so so the Cubs are heading. I'm not going to say put a stamp on it and say you're definitely going to win this week because I've seen crazy stuff happen. I mean, it looks about 95% that you're going to win, but um, the thing is though, what exactly are you playing for? Which what are you playing for the rest of the year? Is your goal 500, playoff spoiler, playoff spot? I mean, that's quite honestly, if it was me, I would be playing just to win some damn games. That's what I would be
Well,
doing, just to win some games. Because I mean, quite honestly, playoffs is probably playoffs is out of reach. I wouldn't worry about that. I would just worry about winning games and
well,
finishing respectively.
but here's how we're looking at things in the Cubs camp right now. In the Cubbies camps, we're looking at things. Our main goal right now is win games, get back up to 500. And the whole time that we're trying to climb back up to 500, we're going to be watching the scoreboard and watching the standings because you're going to have teams like you said in the open. The Wildcats, Ken, they're already out of contention. But how much further are they going to fall? And at the same time, we're going to be watching, are they going to fall when we're going up? Because if that's the case, then, we'll see how things go around the trade deadline. When we get to the trade deadline, we'll reconsider and look at things. It might be at the point where when we come to the trade deadline, we might be on a little bit of a roll and look at it and say we're all in and make moves to make a playoff run. You
Uh,
know,
uh, I'll reframe
it's
comments. I'll
still
reframe
it's
comments
still
from that because it's like I've said in our conversations that we've had. The playoff run is ludicrous, if you ask me, because there's no way.
well, there's still teams out there that think that the Gatlinburg Cubs could end up in a playoff spot.
Well, I'd like to know what they're smoking because I mean, and not downgrade your team. I mean, not downgrading you or your team, but you're 6 games behind. You almost have to go unprecedented 10, 8-2, 9-1, and you're going to need some teams. Maybe Greg's Ducks. I don't see them. They may lose a couple, and we'll get to them in a minute as they're getting beat by Dan. But we'll get to that score in a second. I don't believe Greg is going to drop down. He might lose a couple, but I don't see Greg dropping out of the playoff. I think that's a lock. I think the Express are a lock into the playoff. They're not going to lose, 6, 7, 8 games down the stretch. That's just not going to happen. The question is, you've got Dan and you've got myself, the Dominators. You're 6 games behind me and Dan. You're gonna need a lot of. I mean, you're basically gonna have to run that table, and you're gonna need some help too.
Well,
I just
that's
don't.
kind of what we're
I mean, we'll wrap
that's
it
kind
up
of
with
what we're
this.
banking.
We'll wrap up
We're
this
kind of
conversation with this. I like your spirit, but I like your spirit, but I would just focus on just winning games. You can't look at the playoffs or none of that business. You can't. You got to just win
well,
games.
you
You
know,
got to do what's
I
best for your
think
team.
I think everybody's kind of secretly pulling for the Cubs. I mean, come on, you've seen our mascot.
I'm not pulling for the Cubs. Let me put that
You
on
see
record.
that you you've seen our
As a
mascot
GM, as
today
a
in
GM for the
video.
Georgia Dominators, I am not pulling for the Cubs. I won't. The only time I will pull for the Cubs is when the Cubs are facing the Demon Ducks. That's the
Well,
only time. Only time that I'll pull for the Cubs, and that's only well, not only the Ducks, but Dan and the Express and the Wildcats against Jackson Ken. I'll go for I'll go for Jackson or Kent. But those four teams, and the reason why I mention those teams that I'm pulling against are because they're in front of me. So it only makes, what good does it do for me to wish another team in front of me to win? That's no
Right,
good for me.
right.
Quite frankly, that does no good for me to wish teams ahead of me to win. You agree?
Oh, I agree 100%.
So with that being said, folks, we're gonna go ahead and move off of this game because this game is important for Scotty trying to get out of the loss column and that 1-30 stretch that he's on. Um, that's important, but there's two other games this week that have got huge implications that are way more important than a 1-30 streak. The first game, as we just mentioned a second ago, just a little crazy. That's Dan, 246 points. The Demon Ducks, that's Greg at 205. All right, Scott. So I did some research the last couple days on Greg's team, and all of Greg's victories have been 70 points or fewer. There's no, there's no blowouts, no domination or nothing. And I will say though, and I've said this over and over again, and I do agree with Greg. A win is a win. It don't matter if it's by 200 or by 1 point. A W is a W. You take them any way that you can get them in this league. You take them any way you can get them. And he finds himself behind by 40 against Dan right now. So how do you see this one? Because I hadn't really paid that much attention to this game. Has this one been close all week, or has there been a lot of movement on this game?
Uh, well, I don't think there's a lot of movement. I think the Ducks GM is kind of got a little ahead of himself because I think he thinks that due to circumstances, he thought he was going to run it this week. But I think right now you've seen the biggest change this week because I don't know the exact difference and I don't know exactly how many points. A little bit crazy how it's racked up tonight, but I think he put five starters out against Greg. So I think it'll be a close, but I also think that if Dan don't pull away big time tonight and put Greg away, excuse me, I don't think Dan will have much left in the tank for the rest of the week because I think he's only going to have a couple of starters and Greg's still going to be pretty good shape. So I think that'll be interesting to watch. I think it's going to be a run to the finish line.
Yeah, I've got a feeling that this game is gonna be close. Now, I did mention that about Greg's wins all being within 70 points. I did mention that, and his losses are within all three of his losses now are 80 points or fewer. So he's not blowing folks out, and he's not getting blown out. 80 points is not a blowout. I mean, that's a good gap, but that's not a blowout. So he's not winning big, and he's not losing big either. He's just right now. It's like he's right there on the cups of being great or on the cups of being mediocre. So the second game of the week this week, you had the Georgia Dominators. That's me at 320. The Atlanta Express. That's Ruben at 316. I've been watching this game back and forth as I'm the Dominators GM, but this game is. I've got to say this game is. I think this game is headed, depending on tonight's results and tomorrow. I think this is heading to a 10 p.m. Sunday. Who's got the last player kind of result? Who's going to get those last points? This game has been really close all week. A lot of folks thought the Express would just roll right over the Dominators, and I've proven whether I win this week or not, I don't need to win this game. Quite frankly, I think my opponent, for his mental sake, considering I've won the last four in this series, I think my opponent needs to win this game more than I do. What do you think, Scott?
I think you're in for a tough battle.
Well, I mean, you said that already. A lot of people like Greg have said that that the Express are going to roll right over me. And right now, this game is really tight.
I think it's going to be a tough battle for you, and I think it's going to cut like the Demon Ducks game. I think your matchup's going to come down to the wire.
I mean, it's like I said. I mean, I'm not really happy with my team's performance. There's a couple of a couple of whiffs this week on the pitching that I'm just not thrilled with that I didn't expect. But I mean, I am happy with the team the way it is. Yes, I would like to make a couple of moves, and I've tried to make a couple of moves. It's hard to make moves when you know if it's not the Dominators team as it's structured. It's not as good as years that I've won the title. The 2 years I've won the title, those teams are far better than this team, quite honestly. But this team, I don't know how far this team can go in the playoffs, but just get me into the play. I just want to get to the playoffs, and we'll go from there. As I've shown over and over again, this year I can get over 500 plus points, and that's really the name of the game. If the first one to get to 500 usually is going to win that week. All right, Scott. Anything? We're going to wrap it up real quick as we've gone over our time allowed for this week. Uh, any last comments?
Just go Cubs, go!
All right, we'll leave you off with the Go Cubs Go. I appreciate you joining us this week for the Bullpen Show.
No problem. I always enjoy it.
Thank you.
Look forward to being on the show more often.
We'll see about that. Thank you.
Bye.
Well, that was Scott, the GM for the Cubs. And that is all the time that we have tonight. I hope everybody has a wonderful Saturday and a wonderful Sunday. Make sure you tune back in on Monday for Baseball Now with Scott. And everybody have a wonderful weekend.